Good evening. My name is Chris Johnson. Thank you for joining the first ever Lemonjuice Solutions sponsored live interactive town hall designed for owner and board education. Our plan in sponsoring these events is to give owners and board members a valuable place to learn more about timeshare in general and a chance to speak directly to experts and ask questions. Let me say that again: ask questions, and as many as possible. For questions that we don't get to tonight, we will address in other ways, that is through maybe through our Facebook Live or via traditional methods like email. This event evening's topic is Beyond 2022: Issues, Solutions, and Future Planning for Aging Timeshare Resorts. As I mentioned, this is an interactive forum, and we would love to hear from you. If you have any questions throughout the event, you can press *3 on your phone keypad and you will be placed in line with a member of our staff. They will take down your name, and the next time you hear your name, you will be live on the call and you'll be able to ask your questions directly to the panelists. If you are streaming the event on our website, lemonjuicesolutions.com/town hall, you can simply type your name and question below the streaming player. Let me say that again. If you have any questions throughout this event, please press *3 on your phone keypad and you will be placed in line to speak with a member of our staff. They will take down your name, and the next time you hear your name, you'll be live on the call and you'll be able to ask your question directly. If you're streaming the event on our website, lemonjuicesolutions.com/town hall, you can simply type your name and question below the streaming player. Now, let's introduce our panelists. First up is Kirk Gruber. Kirk is a partner in the national law firm Baker Hostetler, who has been practicing in the hospitality area for over 30 years. He has a special concentration in the shared ownership and travel industries, including timeshares, travel clubs, fractionals, exchange programs, resort condominiums, and vacation home rentals, as well as traditional lodging products. Kurt's clients includes Disney Vacation Development, Marriott Vacations Worldwide, Hilton Grand Vacations, the American Resort Development Association, and of course, Lemon Juice Solutions. Kirk is a graduate from the University of Texas College of Liberal Arts and School of Law. Hook 'em horns. Kirk, over to you. Tell us more about yourself.
Thanks, Chris. First, I want to make sure everybody's recovered from the shock of looking at me live versus my picture. But the one thing I would add to your introduction is that in addition to what you described, I spent over 8 years as in-house counsel for Island One Resorts Management Corporation, which is a timeshare management company. And that allowed me to avoid being a typical lawyer who just pontificates from an ivory tower. As in-house counsel, I spent many hours working on the multiple and diverse issues that timeshare association board members and timeshare owners encounter on a day-to-day business basis. So this real life experience has helped me to not just advise on the law, but offer up practical advice and solutions, which is particularly important when addressing the complex issues facing the aging resorts that we're talking about today. Thanks.
Thank you, Kirk, and absolutely right. Next up is Stacy Hartzog. Stacy is an independent contractor with 28 years timeshare experience as a resort developer and manager. She provides financial, management, and developing consulting and advisory services for developers and investors in the timeshare industry. She owned Amber Group Incorporated and related subsidiaries, developed 5 resorts, and built an owner base of 25,000 owners. In addition, she developed and managed Amber Vacation Club exchange program for the owners. She sold the business after 20 years to Diamond Resorts, now part of Hilton Grand Vacation. Stacy is a certified public accountant, certified global management accountant, and a registered resort professional with ARDA. Stacy graduated from Kennesaw State University with a Bachelor's of Business Administration and Accounting. Scott MacGregor.
I've been involved with many property restructurings, and some of those have resulted in converting properties back into those original real estate uses. Now we're at a point where more than 3/4 of the resorts in the United States are more than 30 years old as timeshares, and many of them were old to begin with. And more than half of the resorts are more than 40 years old. And so I think figuring out what's next for these properties beyond 2022 is certainly the most important and challenging and potentially rewarding opportunity for these boards of directors and management companies that are given the responsibility of figuring out this solution for their owners. Um, so it's great to be among peers that are focused on giving these people the tools and options they need and deserve. And thank you for letting me join you here tonight.
Thank you, Scott. Before we begin our audience participation questions, I'd like to ask each panelist to tell us briefly what is one thing you would like our guests to walk away with understanding after this town hall. And we'll start with Kirk. Kirk, unmute yourself, please.
Didn't want to get feedback. The one thing that I hope everyone takes from this session is that when a resort reaches the critical juncture in its life where important decisions have to be made regarding continuing or taking a different path, board members and owners should not be hesitant to obtain expert advice so that they are informed on their options. Timeshare is a complex real estate product. I know most people don't buy it thinking that they're buying a vacation, but developers bring in many experts when they create a timeshare project. So why wouldn't a board bring in an expert to advise it when it's getting near to its end of life? So it's important to surround yourself with good people who know what they're doing. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kirk. And Stacy.
Yes, I would say that I agree with what Kurt had to say. In addition, I think that it's important for people to understand that there are options in addition to what traditionally the options have been. So I think there's a broader opportunity, one might imagine, at the end of a resort's life or nearing the end of the resort's life. And that's what I would hope that owners, board members, and participants tonight would leave understanding.
Thank you, Stacy. Very nice. And Scott, what do you want our guests to walk away with understanding after this town hall?
Planning is critical. I mean, we live in crazy times, and it just seems to be getting more with all the things going on in the world, the changes in the economy, with COVID. You know, here in Florida, we're still dealing with the Champlain Towers collapse in Surfside and the ramifications that has on so many parts of our business. So looking forward, planning ahead, taking all of these variables into consideration, it's not easy, but it's absolutely critical. And as both Kurt and Stacy have said, there are solutions, but it takes some really good forethought and lots of different viewpoints and really good data to figure out where to go from here. So there are solutions, but it's going to take some work to get there.
Absolutely. And that's why we're here tonight. So I would like to hear from everyone. I'd like to hear from you. We're going to ask a quick poll question. And if you're on the phone, you can vote by pressing the corresponding number on your keypad. If you're online, you can vote by selecting your response below the streaming player. So our first poll question: under the law, board members owe a fiduciary duty to the timeshare owners. What is the fiduciary's duty? Press 1 for requires that board members keep maintenance fees as low as possible. Press 2 for is the highest legal duty that exists and breaching it is considered very serious. Press 3 for if breached by a board member is always covered by directors and officers insurance. Or press 4 for all of the above. Again, that question is, under the law, board members owe a fiduciary duty to timeshare owners. What is the fiduciary's duty? Press 1 for requires that board members keep maintenance fees as low as possible. Press 2 for is the highest legal duty that exists and breaching it is considered very serious. Press 4 for if breached by a board member, is always covered by directors and officers insurance, or press 4 for all of the above. Again, if you are on the phone, you can vote by pressing the corresponding number on your keypad. If you're online, you can vote by selecting your response below the streaming player. Now, let's get to some questions from our audience. We have an online question here. We have one from Keith from Colorado. And he asks, what is your forecast for the future of aging resorts? So let's start with Stacy on this one. What do you think the forecast is for the future of aging resorts?
Well, I think it really depends on the situation with each of the resorts. You have to look at the opportunity for the location, the situation with the owners, and whether there's a good rental market. So you have to really look at the entirety of the resort to determine what the options might be. Some of those options would include repurposing some of the portion of the property or all of the property, if there is ability to do that. The other options include, go ahead.
No, please continue. I apologize.
Other options include partnering with other people in the industry, other resorts, other management groups that maybe have a broader opportunity within the timeshare market. So I think that you have to examine where you are location-wise and determine what the desire is for vacations in that area to see where some opportunities may lie.
Okay, thank you very much. Kirk, do you want to add to this question about what is the forecast for the future of aging resorts?
Well, yeah, I think Stacy's right. It's very fact specific. Your particular resort's location and your situation, your financial situation is important. From a legal perspective, there's kind of a thought under the law that we don't like real estate to just not be used to its highest and best use. So I think the future in one respect is very good because a lot of these resorts are located in very high demanded places or they wouldn't have been resorts in the first place. So either the owners can decide they want to continue the plan and do what it takes to make it work, or they're going to find probably a ready buyer who's going to pay good value for that land and then repurpose it. So I agree that I think it's good, and I do believe that there are a lot of opportunities out there.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kirk. Scott, what do you have to say about this question?
There's not much I can add, but I'm just reflecting on how different the answer to this question has changed from 10 years ago. You know, there used to be the sell option of let's find a way to bring a sales company in or go to a club or a developer and get that unperforming inventory back into the hands of a new person through sales. And it's just amazing to me how much that solution has changed, just due to the market conditions, due to the challenges of selling timeshares into the market, especially in some of these legacy resorts. So the answers that we have to that question today are an awful lot different than they may have been, just a few years ago. And I think what Stacy and Kurt have said, that you really need to think strategically about the value of the real estate and what's in the best interest of the owners is first and foremost, more than it ever has been in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Scott. We have a phone caller now. Let's bring them in. All right, we have a Brandon here. Brandon, tell us where you're from and what's your question?
From Houston, Texas, and my question is, how do I get out of my timeshare?
Let's do a jump ball with that. Let's have Scott start us off. How would Brandon here get out of his timeshare?
Well, I was going to boot this one to Kurt, but my first answer is don't pay a relief company to get you out of your timeshare. They're going to tell you stop paying your maintenance fees and get foreclosed on. They're going to tell you, and we're talking about legacy resorts primarily. The first thing is don't pay somebody to get you out of your timeshare. Contact the homeowners association that you're a member of, contact maybe the party that you purchased it from, depending on who that was, and explore options. I think there's better options that we can do it at a property level, but that's where I would start is don't pay somebody to get you out of your timeshare. You don't need to do that. It's not the right solution.
Okay, good advice. Kurt, you want to add to this?
Yeah, like so many things that we've been talking about and we'll be talking about, some of it is going to be fact specific. If you own the third week of February in Gary, Indiana, it's going to be hard for you to sell it and recoup what you put into it. But kind of teeing off of what Scott said, there are a couple of reputable resale companies out there. Check with your developer, check with your association. But no matter what you do, don't pay any money up front. If it's upfront fee is being asked for, it's a scam. You can also check out ARDA's, the American Resort Development Association, the Timeshare Trade Association. Their coalition for responsible exit. They have a website, responsibleexit.com. And on that website, owners can learn information about how they can responsibly and safely exit their timeshare.
Thank you very much, Kurt. Good advice. Stacy, would you like to add to this question?
Yes, I agree with Scott and Kurt that responsibleexit.com is a really good resource. In addition, I would suggest if people haven't already, I would ask that they meet with the developer or give the developer a call, talk to the people at your front desk at your resort, and get an idea as to what the attitude is towards getting out of your timeshare. Each developer is different, and it really depends on whether they need inventory, whether they don't need inventory. And so I think it's important to start at the resort and developer level. Once you understand that, I would suggest that you get more involved with your association to see what they may be able to do and what programs they might have. So I would just add that to what Kurt and Scott just said.
Great answers. Thanks, panelists. And Brandon, I hope you got the answer you was looking for. We have another caller here. We'll go live with Melissa. And Melissa, you are live. Tell us where you're from and let us know your question, please. Maybe not.
Scott must have scared her off.
Melissa, we can come back to you, okay? We have another caller, though. We have a Sam. And Sam Warren, you are live. Tell us where you're from and what is your question?
Yes, Chesapeake, Virginia. I am board member of a legacy timeshare. We just recently, all of a sudden, had the developer sell his interest in the building, and we just signed a contract for management by the new owner. We have sunset provision, which is not too far ahead. I'm guessing 5 or 6 years. And this company, we have heard, has a history of going in and purchasing as many timeshare units as he can to be able to get voting rights, and then in an attempt to convert the timeshare to another use or tear it down or whatever. So my question is, what strategies should the board pursue in dealing with this new owner?
Thank you for your question, Sam. Was that all?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Panelists, I'll leave this as a jump ball. Who wants to start off the answer for that?
Kurt does.
Kurt? You're up.
I'll say this, and Scott will give you some probably more practical advice on this because he's been more involved in these on the ground on this. But obviously, somebody coming in and buying interests has, they have a agenda. I think it's worthwhile if you have a contact with them. I wasn't real clear whether you said they were doing management or not, but I think it's worthwhile for the board to do some exploratory work to determine exactly what their agenda is. If their agenda is to terminate the timeshare plan, then I think it's incumbent on the board to really explore what the rest of your owner base wants to do. If your resort's a viable resort, you're financially sound, and everybody other than this group wants to continue, then I think to something that Scott said earlier, you should start planning to tackle that sunset vote that's going to probably occur in 5 or 6 years. Try to get as many people engaged at the resort so you know what direction they want to go. And there's a little bit of politicking that goes on. And if there's enough of owners that want to keep the resort, and you think it's a viable project, then you may need to have a somewhat difficult conversation with the group that wants to do otherwise. But you need to make it clear that you're going to do it what the will of the group is, not to please one interest.
Good answer. Thank you, Kurt. Scott, your turn.
Yeah, and as usual, Kurt nailed it, but it really is remembering what's in the best interest of the majority of the owners. If somebody's coming in and not making clear their presence, what their plans are, what their desire is, then you need to wonder why they're not saying that. We've been involved with properties where we've come in the front door and worked with the board and created an exit strategy. We've also worked with many associations where our goal is to manage the property or reset it in a way that is going to be successful for years to come. But the board needs to understand that they act in the fiduciary interests of the majority of their owners. You said you wondered or you thought that the sunset was in a few years. It's really critical that people know what's going on with their governing documents, that they take the time to realize or understand, is there a sunset in 2 years or 5 years or 7 years, and how does it work, and what's I don't expect the timeshare owners to do this, but certainly the board members to understand what the context of those obligations are and to act in accordance with the best interests of the majority of the owners. I love surveys. Surveys are both a great way to communicate to the owners that you're thinking about options, discussing what those options might be, and asking for their feedback. So getting the owners involved in the governance of their property so that no one's surprised, and making sure that the board understands that their role is to act in the best interests of the majority of the owners, given all of the different inputs, is what's critical. And the challenge is most of the boards of directors are made up of very well intentioned and professional and smart people, but they may not have the background in the law or the practicalities of the management. So it's really important that they reach out to people like Kurt or Stacy or us, of course, but to get that advice so that they're not acting on their own in a vacuum. So you kind of gave us like the master's degree question here, and it's something that boards, I think, across the country are facing. The real estate market, it's changing, but it's still been really good. And I think a lot of associations are faced with this exact existential question of what do we do next? Do we reinvest and double down as a timeshare property, or is it time to look to the general real estate market, or something in between? And there are lots of in between. So I thank you for your great question. In summary, engage the owners and reach out to professionals for help and advice and guidance. I'm going to tell you the insurers for the property, the D&O insurers, will really appreciate the fact that they've come to a thoughtful conclusion rather than a quick or simply commercial one.
Very nice answer. Thank you, Scott. Stacy, would you like to add anything?
Yes, I think Scott used a really good word, and that is to engage. Not only to engage with the existing owner base, but to the new group coming in. The more you can engage with those individuals or that company that's stepping in and buying units, the more ideas begin to flow. And this group that's stepping in obviously maybe has an agenda, and that may be a great agenda, and it may be something that all of the owners might be interested in voting for. So the more you can engage with that group as well as your individual owners, I think that is a key for seeing what might need to be done with the property and what all owners, including the group as well as individuals, want to do.
Thank you, Stacy. I appreciate that. Great answer. So the results are in from our first poll question, and the question is, just as a reminder, is under the law, the board members owe a fiduciary duty to the timeshare owners. What is the fiduciary's duty? And in our poll, we see for our answer number one, require that board members keep maintenance fees low. We had 8% vote on that question or answer, excuse me. And then the second one is the highest legal duty exists and breaching is very serious. 46% voted that to be the correct answer. And then for all of the above, including if breached is covered by director's insurance and officer's insurance, that one, number 4, also had 46% answered that question as being a fiduciary's duty. So our panel, what are your thoughts on this first poll?
Well, that's right in my bellywick, so I'll jump right in if that's okay.
Please.
And we've talked a lot about fiduciary duty already, and it comes up a lot. I think the best answer is going to be number 2, and they all have some element of truth to them. But keeping maintenance fees low just to keep them low is might sound like it's the best approach, and in a lot of respects it could be, but a lot of times you have to raise the maintenance fees to keep the doors open, and so. It may be a breach of your fiduciary duty not to raise your maintenance fees. D&O insurance won't cover a breach of fiduciary duty in all respects. There's an intent element to it, but in many cases, if you're breaching your fiduciary duty, you're probably doing something that's going to cross the line and insurance won't cover it. So the best answer is number 2. It is the highest duty in our area, and it's considered very serious if you don't act accordingly. Which I don't want to scare everybody. It doesn't mean you don't make a decision. It just means you make a decision, as I think Scott's said, Stacy has said, in the best interests of everybody at the resort, not in your own self-interest, not in the interest of a minority, a vocal minority, but what is the best. And you do it, if you do it with the right intention, you'll be fine.
Great answer. Anybody want to challenge that or agree with that?
I just want to add on the D&O thing. I one of my roles is I'm very active in renewing or acquiring insurance for the associations that we represent, and the D&O thing for timeshare boards has become a real issue. For lots of different reasons. And a couple of years ago, the questionnaire was 3 or 4 questions about how they conduct themselves and are there certain protocols in place. And the one I'm working on now is about 4 pages where the D&O insurer is asking if the board goes through these various methods in decision making and have backstops. So the only thing that I'll add, and I agree with Kurt, if you're conscientious and you make well-informed decisions and you make them to the best of your ability, you're fine. But it just really is becoming clear that boards of directors, more than ever, are under the microscope when it comes to insurance matters. And what's awful is that they're being asked to make really, really hard decisions in a really difficult environment at the same time. So just keep that in mind.
Yes, sir, we'll do. And Stacy, would you like to round this up for us?
Yeah, I think that what Scott and Kurt said are right. I believe that, you need to be aware of all of the things that Scott and Kurt mentioned. And I really don't have anything further to add to that.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Let's get back to our phone lines. We have Melissa back here, and
Hi.
if we can get her. Melissa, you're live. Tell us where you're from and what's your question.
Oh, Melissa from Greenville, South Carolina. I have a question. How have the Florida laws been impacted since the Surfside building collapse this time last year?
Good question. How about Kirk? Let's start with you on that one.
The Florida legislature just passed SB 4D, which is the name of the bill. The governor has signed it. It requires a number of specific things, but the general idea is that condominiums, and it's a condominium law. Surfside was a condominium, not a timeshare condominium. It requires what they call milestone inspections that occur more regularly than inspections had previously been required, maybe by a county. And you have to look at critical elements of the infrastructure that hadn't been really looked at as intently before. Also, there's a lot more that will go into making assessments on or evaluations on reserve studies to make certain that the funds are there to make repairs as necessary. And on that point, I think timeshare is obviously affected if it's a timeshare condominium. It's not if it's just a regular timeshare plan, not a condominium. But there's a couple of important things to draw on the legislation and for timeshare. And one thing is it's pretty common practice, especially in the early days when developers are in sales, to waive reserves. And that's going to be a little bit more challenging, I think, for associations to do, not because necessarily the law's tightening up, but because the scrutiny is tightening up. And as Scott was just mentioning in terms of D&O insurance, a board or associations that waive reserves, if there's a calamity, there's going to be a lot of analysis of why that occurred. So boards, owners need to be vigilant about their property and understand exactly the status of their infrastructure.
Thank you, Scott. Stacy, would you like to add to that?
Yes, I think that what Kurt said is right on. And in addition to that, I know that boards at legacy resorts are in a difficult situation because they may have a declining paying owner base, and they may have a declining membership or rental program. They're being squeezed by an aging resort that has immediate and necessary repairs and collection issues. And it may be difficult for boards to be able to collect the existing maintenance fee amount, much less an increased amount for a fully funded reserve or replacement fund. So I understand the challenge. The difficult role that the board has is to raise the maintenance fees or include in the maintenance fees the replacement or reserve fund at an adequate amount. And adequate is a vague word right now because some resorts have not even had reserve studies or engineering studies performed in many years. And once those studies are performed, every line item may not be considered necessary for funding. But I think what Surfside has shown is that every line item is possibly necessary for funding. There may be a large balance sitting in some replacement funds, but some resorts say, well, I think we have enough in there to cover what we need. let's don't fund reserves for a few years, or let's cut back. But as you see from Surfside, the continuing necessary repairs and replacements, if not done, sort of build upon themselves till you have a critical situation.
Thank you very much, Stacy. And Kirk, I want to apologize. I called you Scott just then, and I
That's an
wanted to
insult, I think, in some places. I'd rather you
Scott,
call me Stacy. At least she looks a lot better than me.
Scott, would you like to add to this question as well?
Just briefly, I mean, this issue is having a nationwide impact already. We're dealing with properties in other states where the insurance market for property insurance, specifically and D&O insurance, have already been affected by this. I always look for the silver lining, and there is one here. As Kurt mentioned, with regard to reserve studies, this bill has tightened up everything from building codes to the need for that structural integrity reserve study. And what that means is many reserve, often I go in and boards have done their best to have a reserve study in place. And they've looked at what it costs to remodel the lobby and the rooms and replace the furnishings every 5 or 7 or 10 years and do all of those things. But what they often leave short are the structural integrity. And when these structures that we're dealing with are 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, especially here in Florida where they're near the water, if they're concrete and they're exposed to the elements, very, very few of these reserve studies really take into account what you have to do to make sure that the integrity of the building and the infrastructure is properly maintained. And I will tell you, a lot of boards don't want to include that. You add that to the reserve study, all of a sudden your reserve funding account might double, and there go your maintenance fees. But Surfside was $1 billion payout by the parties involved, of the mostly of the insurers and some insurers of related properties and things of that nature. So I think the silver lining here is it's going to force associations and managers to really take a deep dive at their property and say, if I've got a 40 or 50-year-old building, what am I really looking at over the next 10 or 20 years to make sure it's safe and structurally sound and the major mechanicals are all working properly? The only other thing I'll say about this bill, and I've read it a number of times, is more than any that I've seen, it calls out the issue of fiduciary duty of the boards, and it says failure of the board of directors to follow these guidelines will be a breach of fiduciary duty. And I know that was coming from the insurance industry to give them a clear path to say, if you guys don't do this in your deliberations as a board, we don't have to cover you if there's a big claim. So read it. It's available. You can get it from any of us, or certainly through our trade association. Read it, understand it. I don't care if you're in Florida or outside of the state of Florida, because it's going to have national ramifications for sure.
Thank you, Scott. We're going to get to some of these online questions. Got some really good ones here. But before that, let's get our second poll out. And again, we would like to hear from everyone. We're going to ask a quick poll question. If you're on the phone, you can vote by pressing the corresponding number on your keypad. If you're online, you can vote by selecting your response below the streaming player. So our second poll question is, what do you see as the major issues facing your resort or association in 2022 and beyond? Press 1 for lack of adequate cash flow and resources. Press 2 for a collection of maintenance fees. Press 3 for aging resorts and declining quality of property, or press 4 for all of the above. Again, the question is, what do you see as the major issues facing your resort or association in 2022 and beyond? Press 1 for the lack of adequate cash flow and resources. Press 2 for collections of maintenance fees. Press 3 for aging resorts and declining quality of property, or press 4 for all of the above. Now, as we wait for the results of that question, I would like to get to an online question here from Mary Connell. And she says, we are facing sunset in 6 years. Our bylaws require 70% in favor to continue for another 10 years. We doubt we will have that. We are part of a hotel entity that probably wants to take over. What recommendations do you have for approach with buyers? So I will leave that one as a jump ball. Who would like to tackle that question first? Or
Well,
I
let
can
me
do.
just start. I know I always seem to jump in here. That's what lawyers do, right? We get paid by the word we say. It's interesting because when a lot of these documents were drafted in the early '80s, not a lot of thought was given to what was going to happen when the plan term was coming up. And there was a attorney in Southwest Florida or Southeast Florida that drafted the first set. Everybody just copied it, but a 70% vote. So I was going to say there's usually two ways this works. It's either a vote you need to continue or a vote you need to not continue. And this one sounds like it's the vote you need to continue, which is interesting. And a 70% vote is pretty high. And as we all know, it's hard to get 70% of people to agree to anything. And when you in a lot of these situations, you don't even have a really good grasp of your ownership at this point in a project, or people that have kind of fallen off the map. So I don't have a real quick and ready answer. We have been working on legislation in many places. There's a number of laws, timeshare laws that can be helpful. And we have tried to, by statute, change the percentage to be a more realistic number. And so, one thing to look at is to see if there's some statutory help. If not, then it can go either way on statute. Sometimes it's not helpful, and sometimes you can't even use it. But if not, we're back to that same thing about getting on top of it early, getting out to your owner base, understanding what most of the people want, getting them invested in the process, getting them to consider how they want to vote. And if you sense that you want to continue it, there are things you can do, including collecting votes up front. It sounds kind of weird, but you can do it. You can get proxies, you can get consents to declarations and stuff that you can build over time, so that when you get to that 6-year period, you've already got a number of people lined up, and hopefully you can get to that critical number.
Thank you, Kurt. Stacy, would you like to add to that question?
I would like to say that, it's difficult for most legacy resorts to get anybody to engage on a reasonable scale for voting for budgets, annual meetings. So when you look at a 70% threshold, that's very difficult. What makes a lot of sense, starting in advance by contacting your owners through both email, text, if you're allowed to do that, check-in, anywhere you can capture an owner's opinion, to do that. Now, I know, Kurt, there's probably some limitation on how long a proxy is good for. So to the extent that you can collect opinions from owners any way you can, as far in advance as you can, then that's going to give you an opportunity to have as close to a 70% vote as you can. And if you can't, you've proven that you have made every effort. So I would just encourage early attempts and all types of attempts.
Thank you, Stacy. And we have 10 minutes left in our town hall today. But Scott, I really want to hear your answer to this question, and we have several other questions. We're going to try to get a couple of those in, along with the poll result. But Scott, please help us. What would you say to that question?
So plan ahead and get in front of it is certainly the case. As Stacy and Kurt both mentioned, getting in front of it, you may even find that you can amend your declaration. This would be the time to really get your owners involved. I want to just step back, and I'm looking back at some of my own responses tonight, and it's not intended to be negative or doom and gloom. We love the timeshare business, and the future is very, very bright. Every resort has its own solution, and the message that's here is let's look to the future. Let's look beyond 2022. Let's put together a plan that is going to work for the best interest of the majority of the owners. And to do so requires some time to go out and get the opinion of those owners, find out where they want to do, what's important, what's going on in the market of that resort, and put together a plan. And sometimes a catalyst like this is exactly what you need to kind of rally the troops. So, in that toolbox is not just getting feedback. I completely agree. You may be able to get votes and proxies and things, but maybe it's even amending the documents by which that sunset in 5 or 6 years is going to be governed. You may even find that if a majority of the owners are just saying, I'd like to move into a different product, I'd like to exit now, maybe there's even a way to accelerate it and work with that entity to take advantage of a real estate market that's been really great for the last couple of years. So just get in front of it, take it as an opportunity, and there will be a good outcome if you work at it and you work at it in advance.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Chris. I want to jump in and say something about what Scott just said, which is actually I applaud this caller because 6 years, we got time. I mean, often this issue gets presented and the votes up in a year or so. So 6 years, you've got time. There's a solution there.
Very nice. Thank you. Let's get to our poll question, and then we're going to ask another question here from our online audience. But we have some results from our poll question. Again, the poll question was, what do you see as the major issues facing your resort or association in 2022 and beyond? And for our first answer, we'll just go with the majority answer here. 82, if I could scroll down, sorry, 76% said all of the above. And all of the above was lack of adequate cash flow and resources, collection of maintenance fees, aging resort, and declining quality of property. All of the above when it comes to what they see as major issues facing the resort or association from 2022 and beyond. So we see that this is on a lot of people's minds. A lot of good answers to the questions that we've already had, which address a lot of these issues as well when it comes to our legacy resorts. But I would like to get to this other question online from Long Nguyen. He says, what is your biggest challenge currently and how are you overcoming it? So that's a weighty question, but we only have about 3 minutes each, 1 minute each to answer it. So we'll start with Stacy.
Well, that's a loaded question. The biggest challenge for the industry, I assume, is what she's asking, or not sure. But I think the legacy resort is one of the largest challenges for the industry, and how to cohesively tackle the issue of, as the poll question said, tackling that issue of the lack of adequate funding, lack of maintenance and repairs, and sometimes it snowballs, and that's why we got all of the above answers. We understand that. That's the most challenging issue facing legacy resorts.
Thank you, Stacy. And Kirk, what do you say about that?
Well, I like to make everything about me, so I'm going to take the question personally. And what's the biggest challenge in this space for lawyers, which then translates for the board and owners too, obviously, because you look to us to give you solutions. The biggest challenge really is, we've kind of touched on it briefly, and we could do a whole another hour on the subject, and that is we don't have a clear path to a clear end under the law. We have a patchwork of documents, a patchwork of laws, and we have very divergent interests each with their own agenda. You may have an owner, everybody else realizes that the property needs to be sold and everybody benefits, and you got a couple people that just don't want to, go along with it, or you have the reverse. Everybody wants to stay on it, and you got some interest group somebody mentioned that came in and has a different agenda. And when you ask lawyers, then, okay, what's the answer? And we say, okay, we'll look at the documents. Well, okay, that tells us not much, or it tells us things we don't want to say. Or you look at the law and it doesn't help. Or when you intersect the law and the documents, you end up with some very convoluted and confusing responses. So on the legal side, it's not the clearest path. We're working towards making it better. To echo Scott, there is always a solution there, and the challenge is to make sure that we're giving good advice, and that the majority of the owners will come out happy, and we've been successful in that. So I also want to end on a positive note and say that there are solutions out there.
Thank you, Kurt. And Scott, to round us off.
Just very quickly, the last poll question, I think, said it all. If 76% of the people said all of the above are the problems facing their resorts, it's an opportunity, right? Now's the time to mobilize and start asking questions about what are our options in the future. There are great options. There's lots of them. And for the people that love their vacation ownership project, and there's the majority of them, just maybe the current situation isn't working for them, let's find the right solution for them. So the biggest problem is also the biggest opportunity of taking this train that's been coming at us for 40 years, the maturity of these resorts, the maturity of these owner bases, and all of the things that are going on in the periphery. Let's take that and turn it into a great positive for the people, the resorts, and the industry by saying there's great solutions out here. Let's not let the train hit us before we've taken advantage of the ability to think ahead and make a plan that's going to work.
Thank you, Scott. Very well said. So we are unfortunately coming to an end of our live owner and board educational event this evening. I would like to thank you for taking the time to join us for this important live town hall, Beyond 2022 Issues, Solutions, and Future Planning for Aging Timeshare Resorts. And I'd like to thank our panelists, Kurt Gruber, Stacy Hartzog, and Scott MacGregor. We appreciate the opportunity to speak directly with you and answer your questions. And if we did not get to your question today, or you have an additional comment, please stay on the line after the call has ended, and you will be automatically transferred to our voicemail system where you can leave your questions or comments, or you can send an email to solutions@lemonjuice.biz, or you can also call our office at 321-754-1033 and push 5. Also, our panelists' information is on your screen. You may contact them directly should you wish. A special shout out goes to Shep Atchuler from TBMA, who assisted in helping launch this important series. Please stay tuned for the next Beyond 2022 educational series, where we will take a look at the changes in the economy and the impacts on legacy resorts. Thank you all for attending. We will host more of these events in the future to keep you informed, so please stay tuned for our next Beyond 2022 series. Thank you again, and have a good evening.